Hi, so my name is Patrick Hawks. I'm going to be talking to you about my game for the final prototype for the Game 101 class. Um, so basically my game is a strategy war game where it's based upon the US Civil War, and um, basically the goal for both sides is to capture the other side, and particularly to capture these key cities. There's four of them. The first one is Montgomery, then there's Richmond, DC, and New York. And once you control all these cities, then you win the game. And so how the game works is it's split up into phases. Basically, the first phase is your purchasing phase. So each faction has a certain number of points based on how much territory they control. And so when you control territory, those add to your points or subtract to your points based on if you gain it or lose it. The south starts with 29 and the north starts with 30. And you can use these to purchase different types of units. So there's infantry, artillery, cavalry, and officers. And there's different costs for each, along with attack and defense numbers for each. So the first phase is the purchasing phase. So you're going to look at how many territory points you have, and then you're going to use that to buy however many units you'd like. Then the next phase is going to be the battle phase, and basically you're going to pick where you'd like to attack. You can attack anywhere that you are touching with your territory with two enemy territories. And once you attack a territory, so like if these guys go and attack Ohio, these two guys over here cannot attack their territory once they're attacking. So you can also, it's wherever territory that you're touching, along with whatever territory is connected to these sea lanes. So there's one here, one city here, which is New Orleans, and then it's also connected to New York and Boston. And those cities basically have access to one another. So you can invade by sea as well. So after the attack phase, we move on to the movement phase. So you can move around your units and your territories based on their movement strength, the M. And once the players are done with that, you move on to the placement of units. So after you had the units that you purchased, so for example, if we purchased these units for each side, then you would place them on the board, and you can put them wherever you'd like as long as it's your territory. And then after you place your units, you're going to count up your territories, make sure that you have the right number for your territory points meter, and then you're going to draw a chance card. So let's get started. So you're going to decide which player goes first. So let's say you roll a dice and the Union player goes first. Each round, the player going first is going to swap just to keep it, fair. So to start the game, you're going to start with the purchasing phase. So you're going to look at your territory number. The Union player starts with 30, the Confederate with 29, just based on the number of territories, what numbers they have. So the Union player could get something like this. So if you look at the chart with their cost, so if he gets 5 infantry at 2 apiece, that's 10, plus 2 cavalries at 5 apiece is 10, so that's 20, and then an officer at 10 apiece, which is 30 total. The Confederate player could get 3 infantry, which costs 3 for him, so that's 9, plus an artillery unit, which is going to cost 5, so that's 14, plus an officer, which is 15, so that's going to be 29 total. So once you do that, you're going to place those guys to the side. Those guys are going to be placed down later in the round. Next thing you're going to do is start the battle phase. So the Union player going first, let's say he wants to invade Louisiana via the sea route. So he could use his force up here in New England, and bring them down here to get ready for battle. And if that's all he wanted to attack with, then it would be the second player's turn, the Confederate. If he wanted to attack Ohio, he could from his territory. So then the battle would commence. So the Union player would do his battles first. So it would start with the Union player has an infantry, a cavalry, and an artillery attacking, versus the defending Confederates have a general with an artillery defending. So the Union player would attack first. He would look at his attack numbers for his units. So his infantry, when it's alone, it has an attack of 1, but when it's paired with an artillery, it actually has an attack of 2. So the infantry has an attack of 2, the artillery has an attack of 2, and the cavalry has an attack of 3. So if he does the cavalry first, he doesn't get any hits. If he does the artillery next, he needs basically that number on the dice or less. He gets a hit because he gets a 2, which is 2 or less to get a hit. And then an infantry, which is also a 2 or less, and he doesn't get a hit. So he gets 1 hit, which means that there's 1 casualty for the Confederate player. The Confederate player, before that happens, can also fire back. So the Confederate player has a defense of 5 for the officer and a defense of 2 for the artillery. So if he rolls the officer first, he has to get a 5 or less, and does not happen. And then if he rolls the artillery next, he has to get a 2 or less, and he gets a 1. So he gets a hit as well. So they each get a hit, and they're each going to pick a player or a piece to be taken off. So the Union player is going to take his least valuable unit, which is his infantry, off. And the Confederate player is going to take his least valuable, which is the artillery. And now the Union player can decide if he wants to keep fighting or if he wants to go home. So let's say that he decides he wants to go home. So he would just withdraw from the battle, and they would take their casualties, and he would return to New England, and the Confederate player would be safe for now. If the Union player is done attacking, then it goes to the Confederate player, or the second player's turn. So up here we have 2 infantry and a cavalry attacking 1 infantry on the Union side. So for the Confederate player, his cavalry attack with a 3, so he rolls that first, and he gets a 6, which is not 3 or less. And then he has 2 infantry, which attack with 1s, and he needs to get basically both 1s to get hits. And he gets 1 hit, so he does kill the defending Union player. The Union player can fire back, though. The Union player's infantry has a defense of 2 or less, so he does not get a hit. So The Union player did not inflict any casualties, and he lost his territory and his unit, and so he lost 2 territory points. And so what you would do down here is you would subtract 2, so he would be at 30 now, while the Confederate would move from 29 to 31. And then the Confederate could decide where he would want his units, so he could move up those 2 guys and leave the cavalry behind. So after the battle phase is done, then it's going to be movement. So the first player starts again, so it's going to be the Union player. So he can move, if he wanted to, he can move this cavalry, which has a movement of 2. Cavalry and officers can move 2 spaces, while infantry and artillery can only move 1. So he was here, he could move, let's say 1, 2 over here. And if he was done moving, then it would be the second player's turn. So he could move from here up to Tennessee, and just do that because the infantry can only move 1. And then once that player is done, then the players put down the units that they purchased in the beginning of the round. So the Union player has a bunch of infantry he wants to put down, so he can put them down wherever he'd like in his territory. Just keep placing them where he'd like. So defending his ports because he doesn't want to get invaded is a smart move. The Confederate player can also defend his ports, defend Virginia since he has a major city there and doesn't want to lose it. And they place all their units. And so once that phase is done, then you move on to just counting up all of your territories, making sure that your number is correct. So we only had 1 difference from the initial starting point, which was the -2 by the Union, +2 for the Confederate. So the territory points meter reflects that. After that's done, each player draws a chance card. So the Union player, the first player, starts, and he draws a card that says new recruits +3 infantry to be placed next turn. So basically he gets 3 extra infantry that he can put down on the next turn as like a plus thing. It's like a pro. The Confederate player draws, his is bad, demotion, demote 1 general to a cavalry unit. So he has to go in, find a general, pick one, so like this guy, and he has to replace him with a cavalry, like that. So the chance cards are either going to be good or bad. It's going to be completely random. And so after that's done, you're basically going to check to see if one player controls all 4 of the major cities. So nothing here happened because it was just the beginning of the game. But if one player controlled all 4 major cities, then that player would be the winner and the game would end. Otherwise, you just repeat and start with the purchasing again, and then you go to the battle and then the movement, and then tally or place your units, tally up your points, and then draw a chance card again. It just keeps repeating until there's a winner. Thank you for listening.